So welcome to this screencast from Access Anatomy that's going to outline the autonomic nerves of the gastrointestinal tract. So to start off with, let's just draw out a simplified version of the GI tract and represent it as just a long tube. We'll divide this tube into three. So we have the foregut, midgut, and the hindgut. Then if we draw running alongside the gastrointestinal tract the abdominal aorta, then the abdominal aorta we can see here. We can see it bifurcating into the common iliac and also the internal iliac, which we can see here. So here's our external iliac, bifurcation of the aorta. We can also include the inferior mesenteric artery. We can include the superior mesenteric artery, and we can include the celiac trunk. So here we have the abdominal aorta. Surrounding each of these main blood vessels, the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric artery, are some aortic plexuses that contain parasympathetic and sympathetic fibres. So if we draw the celiac plexus here, surrounding the celiac trunk, and we'll call it CP, the celiac plexus. And then around the superior mesenteric artery, we can have the superior mesenteric plexus. And surrounding the inferior mesenteric artery, we can have the inferior mesenteric plexus. We have a few more plexuses that we need to detail. We have one that surrounds the bifurcation of the aorta, and this is known as the superior hypogastric plexus, superior hypogastric plexus. And we also have one that surrounds the internal iliac artery. In fact, we have two of these, as we have two internal iliac arteries. And these are the inferior hypogastric plexus. The superior hypogastric plexus is in connection with the inferior hypogastric plexuses by way of some hypogastric nerves. And here we can see those hypogastric nerves. We have a left and we have a right hypogastric nerve. So here we've got our hypogastric nerve. So we have a series of these aortic plexuses. The next thing I want to do is just draw out again a rather simplified version of the spinal cord. So here we'll just draw a long tube that represents the spinal cord, and we can divide the spinal cord up into its respective regions. So we can have the cervical, thoracic, lumbar and sacral. So here's the cervical, here's the thoracic, here's the lumbar, and here's the sacral. We'll also just need at the top here to include the brainstem for when we talk about the vagus nerve later on. It's also important that we remember that running alongside the spinal cord, or alongside the vertebral column, we have the sympathetic chain. The sympathetic chain contains sympathetic fibres that have left the spinal cord from the thoracic and the lumbar region. So let's see how this sympathetic chain is formed by some of these thoracic and lumbar sympathetic fibres. So if you're a sympathetic nerve and you're associated with the abdomen, then you're going to leave from the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th thoracic spinal cord segments. You're also going to leave from the 1st, 2nd and 3rd lumbar segments. Now, if you're a sympathetic nerve, you're going to pass towards the sympathetic chain. So these are presynaptic sympathetic fibres. Now, if you're a sympathetic nerve that's going towards the thoracic viscera, then you'll form a synapse here with a postsynaptic sympathetic fibre, and you'll pass to the heart or the lungs. But if you're an abdominal sympathetic nerve, going to supply part of the gastrointestinal tract, then these presynaptic fibres will pass straight through the sympathetic chain without synapsing to synapse at pre-aortic ganglia. And we have 3 of these associated with the 3 main arteries. So we have the celiac ganglia, we have the superior mesenteric ganglia, and we have the inferior mesenteric ganglia. So if you're a sympathetic fibre from T5 to T9, you're going to pass towards the celiac ganglia. So they pass through the sympathetic chain without synapsing, and then these fibres run towards the celiac ganglia. And this is a presynaptic fibre. All these fibres run in what's known as the greater splanchnic nerve. The greater splanchnic nerve. Once it gets to the celiac ganglia, this presynaptic fibre is going to synapse with a postsynaptic fibre. It then passes within the celiac plexus towards the branches of the celiac trunk, where it then goes to the foregut. It runs alongside the arteries that supply the foregut as periarterial branches and deliver sympathetic input to the organs of the foregut. If we then look at T10 and T11, these 2 segments give rise to presynaptic fibres that go towards the superior mesenteric ganglia as the lesser splanchnic nerve. The lesser splanchnic nerve. Again, this is going to form a synapse with a postsynaptic fibre that passes towards the superior mesenteric plexus and follows the branches of the superior mesenteric artery to supply sympathetic input to the midgut. This sympathetic input is reinforced via the least splanchnic nerve. So here we can see the least splanchnic nerve. The least splanchnic nerve is going to deliver presynaptic fibres to the superior mesenteric ganglia, where it forms a synapse with a postsynaptic fibre that also then passes towards the midgut. The inferior mesenteric ganglia receives branches from the first, second and third lumbar segments, and these pass to the inferior mesenteric ganglia, and these are known as your lumbar splanchnic nerves. Lumbar splanchnic. From here, exactly the same happens. It synapses with a postsynaptic fibre, and this time it passes through the inferior mesenteric plexus and alongside the inferior mesenteric artery to the hindgut. So here we can see the formation of the greater, lesser, least and lumbar splanchnic nerves. So now let's turn to the parasympathetic input. The main parasympathetic nerves of the abdomen are going to be the vagus nerve and the pelvic splanchnic nerves. The vagus nerve is going to leave from the medulla oblongata of the brainstem, and this enters the abdomen via the esophageal hiatus, where it then runs over these vagal trunks, run over the surface of the stomach. The posterior trunk goes to form the celiac plexus, but notice how this is a long presynaptic fibre. It doesn't form a synapse in any ganglia. This presynaptic fibre runs within the celiac plexus and then follows the arterial supply to the organs of the foregut, where this long presynaptic fibre then synapses with a short postsynaptic fibre within the wall of the target organ. And this is our vagus nerve. The posterior trunk of the vagus nerve within the celiac plexus then passes down into the superior mesenteric plexus, where these presynaptic fibres then follow the branches of the superior mesenteric artery towards the midgut. Again, this long presynaptic fibre will synapse at the wall of the target organ with a postsynaptic fibre. So now let's look at the pelvic splanchnic nerves, which are coming from S2, S3 and S4 segments of the sacral spinal cord. They run towards the inferior hypogastric plexus as pelvic splanchnic nerves. So here we've got our pelvic splanchnic nerves. And then within the inferior hypogastric plexus, they then ascend within the hypogastric nerves to the superior hypogastric plexus, which then runs towards the inferior mesenteric plexus and then passes towards the hindgut alongside branches of the inferior mesenteric artery. This long presynaptic fibre will then synapse with a short postsynaptic fibre on the wall of the target organ. So here we can see the full distribution of the autonomic nerves to the abdominal viscera.